All right. I have no idea if the audio even played on that stream, but we'll see what happens. I might have to re-enable audio before we go. But welcome to another episode of Remote Voices. We are joined by two guests this time, and I just now realized that Charlie is like in the waves down at the bottom of our graphic here. I don't know. Put some books underneath you or something so that we could like see your face, because we don't usually have 5 people on the podcast all at once. So we've got a good amount of folks on our stream today. We're joined by the co-founders of Remotion, a awesome competitor to Yak, but in a very different way. And we love these guys, and we're gonna get their thoughts on remote work. So Alexander, Charlie, thank you for joining us. Don't all talk at the same time, but one of you give us a quick intro to Remotion, your position, what you're doing, and all that good stuff. Go for it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Hey, folks. So I'm Alexander. I'm calling in from Brooklyn. And Charlie, do you want to say where you're calling from?
Hey, I'm Charlie. I'm calling in from Chicago.
So quick story about us. I'm actually like a super mixed, half Greek, half Malaysian, Canadian guy who grew up in Switzerland. Came to the States for college, which is where I met Charlie back in engineering math. And ever since I got to the States, I felt this tension between like, all the awesome jobs and work that I could do were here in the States, but I kind of wanted to be nearer to like my family and stuff back in Europe. And so, after college, I went to work at Dropbox, was a PM there for a while. After Dropbox, I worked on a game streaming startup that didn't work out, but I wanted to keep going. And so Charlie and I started working together, and we were both living in San Francisco at the time, but there was this one catch, which was that he had to move to Chicago. And so as we started working together and thinking back to our experiences working on remote tools, we realized that, every time Charlie would visit, our relationship was just so much, not only more productive, but we just felt more connected. And, many people will say, don't co-found a company remotely, like maybe hire people remotely, but don't co-found remotely. And, we felt a lot of that pain. We realized the tools weren't there. So started working together on Remotion.
Awesome. Charlie, does that match your story? Is that how it went? Or are you in indentured servitude and you just don't speak up?
No, so I was actually at Google beforehand, and what happened was my significant other got into medical school in Chicago. So like, all right, time to move out of the Bay Area. And I explored kind of all the options for working at Google Chicago, and there just wasn't something interesting. And I realized what I really wanted was to work on the things that were most impactful and interesting to me, and wherever I was. And so meeting up with Alex again, and kind of talking about what things we could do, it realized how big of a need there was for building things that allow people to work everywhere.
Well, so just to get the Bay Area, that's going to be a theme moving forward, I think, in this presentation.
For sure. I mean, it's basically what we stand for. And actually part of the problem is that people have to move to the Bay Area in the first place, right? Like, I don't think I have to convince you folks that like, okay, distributed teams are the future, but like, why? I think there's some folks you'll talk to who say it's so that you don't have to commute to an office. I think that's valuable, but actually the really valuable thing is so that you can do your best work from wherever you're happiest. And okay, so that means you're going to be working remotely. And our point of view is that the problem with working remotely is that it can feel remote, sort of somewhat intuitively. Our mission is to help distributed work not feel remote and to help teams build really collaborative cultures. And I think our sort of unique point of view on this is that there is a place for face-to-face communication, and a lot of collaboration is best when it's face-to-face. And a lot of sort of brilliant ideas and like moments of belonging and connection are serendipitous. And so that's why we're building Remotion, which is a quick video chat app that basically just puts your team on your screen so you can see who's around and who's free to chat and jump into quick conversations.
Awesome. Well, we are going to do our standard Remote Voices setup. We're going to throw some stuff on the screen right now and go over some news from the Twitterverse and talk over that. Let me pull up my screen here. Let me check the box for share audio this time. All right. Can you guys see my presentation now? Let's see.
Yep.
Yep.
Wow.
Go.
You are
And
good.
right off the bat, it's exactly what I said it would be. Just terminated my SF lease after 4.5 years there. Looking forward to a nomadic summer and fall. What are your favorite places on the West Coast? Criteria: warm weather and near. I find this interesting for a number of reasons, mostly because 5 years nearly in SF and they're getting out now, but also this nomadic summer and fall. Travel is a little bit difficult these days with COVID. So, we talked to a lot of startups in kind of like the nomad space that help people find places to work, help people go travel abroad. I am all for people moving out of San Francisco or getting out of at least their Silicon Valley bubble and being able to move to basically wherever they want and still be just as successful. But it could not have happened at a worse time because now you can't travel and just like have this freedom to be everywhere. So, what do you guys think about not only canceling these leases and actually kind of living this nomadic lifestyle, but where are they even going to go? I mean, Alexander, where did you say you're based out of?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York, which is like
you're in the epicenter right now.
Yeah, not a better place right now.
Okay, well, you are in a not so great place. I know that San Francisco was one of the first places to do lockdowns. I guess my thought is like, where can this guy go right now? We just hired a new developer who's in Seattle right now, working for a big company. And actually, the reason why we hired him is he wants to travel abroad, and he basically likes being in a different country like every week. And his company said, well, sorry, that's way too complicated for us. You could move to one of these 4 locations so that taxes are not, a pain for us, but that's it. So he came to me and said, well, I know that you're really flexible. Can I have my old job back? Because I want to be able to travel. Where would you travel if you could go anywhere today, right now, Alexander?
Where would I travel? Wow. To be honest, I mean, I've thought about moving elsewhere, but right now, and I'm sure it feels similarly for you all, like it doesn't feel like there's that much time to travel. I feel like, we, just like you, we were thinking about like some ideas and like, what should we build? And during 2019, it maybe felt like we had the time to iterate and like travel while iterating, say. But when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden we realized, there's like a really big responsibility that we have, and also opportunity to get things right. So we've been pretty heads down. Like I've thought about going somewhere else, and frankly, there's just not much time. So I'm in Brooklyn. If I could travel though, and I would go somewhere, I would probably go somewhere near to family, I guess. So right now my family's in Malaysia because my family's all over the place. Maybe I'd go there.
Nice. Charlie, what about you? Where would you go?
I really wanted to explore more of actually just the Midwest and just various parts of the U.S. that you don't normally see. Before all this pandemic stuff, I did a really nice road trip. I drove from Chicago all the way down to Alabama, and I just saw a lot of the U.S. that you just normally get to interact with, and there's a lot of great parts of the
Plus one on that.
go around.
I'm wanting to go to the Midwest too. That was on my agenda. I want to just go somewhere random. I want to go to like Wyoming or like, somewhere super random. That would be really cool.
Get a yak log cabin up there and hang out. Paint it yellow.
South Dakota, here I come.
I want to make a point on this tweet though. Like, it's great that Brenner is happy to be terminating his lease and having a nomadic summer and fall. Like, I think that though there is this misconception that a lot of remote work is like, okay, let's go be nomadic. And like our team is full of tech people who don't live in the Bay Area. We're across like 4 continents, 6 time zones, I think, and like 8 cities, all the way from like Australia to India to like various parts of America. And none of us are nomadic at the moment. And I think that the main set of people to support is actually people who are working from wherever, say, their family is or their roots are, and less about supporting nomads. I mean, being a nomad is great, but part of why, not to go on a long sort of monologue here, but part of why we think we need products like Remotion is because since the shift from like more agrarian society to more urban society, where people are having to move for jobs, they're getting uprooted from where their family and friends are, moving to some like new city, and so therefore work has to be a larger part of their community. And so we feel at Remotion, part of our duty is not just about helping people be productive, but it's about helping people form community while they are wherever they are, and work is an important part of that today. But we think it'd be even better if there was less of a burden on work to be in people's communities, and like, you could be near to your family and near to the friends that you grew up with without having to move to that big city. And being nomadic is good, but it still probably means you need more of that from work.
I think you're right, though, that the nomad lifestyle is not just remote work, right? It's like the pro version of remote work. When you go like all in, there are other ways to work remote and not be bouncing country to country every week. You could just live at home with your family in a normal, suburban house. So yeah, I think it's right to, differentiate those things. I think for me, just at a baseline, what's exciting about this is it's happening, right? Like it's happening. People that would have probably told you before, like, I will never leave. I can't leave. I can't afford to leave. My job won't be the same. Whatever the reason would have been, we can look at this and go, it's happening. People are actually saying, yep, this was it. This was the kick that I needed. I'm finally able to move out of, the valley and just go wherever I want and have the same job. And I think that transition is super cool. And I think it's great that we're seeing big players and big names say, take that first step, which is establishing the normalcy of it. And so you'll start to see more and more people, not having that pressure to have to stay, in that area. I love that we lost Hunter in the middle of this. I guess he just didn't want to talk about this topic, but
I think he lost power.
Oh,
what
man.
he said.
It was storming really bad there. So maybe he'll come back after the internet comes back on. All right. So this is, again, David, we've got DHH here in our feed again. Wait, what? Facebook is seriously going to dunk someone's salary if they move. That's barbaric. And I happen to know what this one's about. I think that they made the announcement very poor. Because I understand the mathematics behind it, because the mathematics typically work in the positive direction. It is totally normal when a team is fully remote, that you base their salary off of where they live, because you have to you can't pay everybody the exact same amount of money, even if they're the exact same position, because cost of living is different in different areas. Now, ideally, with the last tweet that we just looked at, maybe that won't be an issue anymore because people won't have to live in some very high cost of living area. But that's totally normal to me, that you would have to pay somebody in San Francisco different than you would have to pay somebody in where I'm at, St. Cloud, Florida, where cost of living is very low. I think the problem here is that the news release and the way that it was pitched from a PR perspective was the reverse. It was, instead of paying people more when they need more money, he said he was going to start cutting salaries if they worked remote. And I don't know if that was purposeful or if that was just really, really bad wording of the release. Did you guys at Remotion see this article?
Yeah.
This is like a major question, right? Like, it's like when you open the world's labor force is distributed, right? And when all of a sudden an employee who lives in, say, San Francisco is actually competing for the same job with someone who lives in, say, Uruguay, it becomes harder to compete, right? And competition breeds, better efficiency for almost everyone involved. But it's really challenging to deal with because, now you're in San Francisco and, okay, there's another person who can do similar work to me at a lower cost. How does the company deal with that? I think this is a tricky thing that companies are going to have to figure out on a case-by-case basis, because I agree with you. Like, the opportunity that someone in Uruguay has now to compete for, say, jobs in San Francisco is amazing. And that can change lives and really elevate people up. But on the other hand, how do the people who previously had less competition deal with things going forward is tough. I think when we look at this at Remotion, one of the things that we think about when we're hiring is like, how do we hire people who really believe in the mission of elevating people's lives everywhere around the world? And so we actually bias towards hiring outside of Silicon Valley, because that means we're hiring people who, wants to create a life for themselves where they are, where their roots are. And we think that's really valuable, and slightly more valuable actually than people who want to sort of travel a lot while they're working.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because we kind of have like the same thoughts. Not that it's like we're totally against it, but we're kind of the underdog, right? When you're being remote, I don't know if you can necessarily give into the Silicon Valley thing, trying to build a distributed company. So I agree. And then I guess we lost Justin too, but I think the other interesting thing about that tweet is just like the context or like the delivery was really bad. Like I feel like generically saying, cutting salaries, it just also automatically makes people like nervous or like, so what does that mean? Or like, what does that entail? I don't know.
I think for running a remote company, you have to be really deliberate about everything you do and the decisions you make. And the crisis we're going through is forcing companies to not have the chance to be deliberate about these things. They have to kind of figure out how hard it is to actually decide all these policies in place.
It's super interesting. That's one thing we should actually like talk about. It's super interesting seeing all the people who are being forced to go remote and they've like never gone remote before, and figuring out just kind of like the little nuances and things that like make remote work. And it's fascinating to me that, one, how many people are just trying to figure it out, and then two, how many people are like, oh, we'll never go remote. But now that like the giants are like, hey, it's remote, everybody's like, or some people are like, okay, I guess we'll try remote, or like see what's up. There's like a weird, almost like confirmation bias. Like people are like thinking about it, and then they see Twitter go remote, and they're like, okay, so I guess we'll be doing it too. What do you guys think about that? Like, have you seen that as well?
Oh yeah, of course. I think it's actually been really great because it looks like a lot of these companies have done a better job of going into remote than expected. Like people have adjusted and adapted to this new world and are just immediately seeing the benefits without needing to wait the whatever many years it would have taken otherwise.
Yeah.
One of the amazing things. Sorry, I got an echo. Should I hold on for a second?
Oh. Yeah, maybe it's Justin here. I'm gonna message him real fast. Oh, of course, technology. You have an echo really bad at Justin. Mute yourself. All right, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool. I
Sounds
think
good
the echo's gone. Yeah, what were you saying?
Yeah, so I was going to say that one of the amazing things that we see when companies start working remotely is they realize like, hey, a lot of the way that we work together is hard. It's kind of broken now. It's hard. And so they spend a lot of time intentionally thinking about how to operate as a company. And I think that spending that time thinking about, how do we communicate? What is the role of meetings or not, or synchronous time versus asynchronous time? How do we make decisions? That is really good stuff to be thinking about in general. And so shifting to remote, even if it's temporary or semi-permanent, semi-temporary, is a really valuable exercise, I think, for company leadership to go through. And make adjustments that in some cases are, say, like more inclusive or more efficient or lead to more productivity or more control of people's lives. So I think it's great that we're seeing this.
I totally agree. I think that's such a great point to make. Because even us internally, because like we're playing almost like educators now, if you will. We're seeing so many people being like, okay, maybe we don't need to have this like hour-long meeting for no reason, or like maybe we don't need to talk, 7 times a week or whatever it may be. So maybe it's like, okay, maybe we wait for Johnny to become available to include him too. I totally agree. I think it's really cool to see people not only just like, whether it's remote or not remote, just kind of figure out, okay, maybe we can make ourselves more efficient in the day-to-day.
I love that your go-to name is always Johnny. Like, do you know anyone named Johnny? Like this isn't the 1960s.
Don't know a single Johnny.
Maybe that's why
I know John, but I don't know. I don't
like. It's
I
just
don't know
weird,
anybody actually named Johnny.
Well, we've had, just as per normal, the most technical issues in the entire world. I can't even use my mic anymore, so hopefully I'm not echoing. You guys hear an echo anymore?
You're great.
Nope, you're good.
We're just using a MacBook Pro microphone now and speakers, so hopefully everything will be fine. Hunter's back. Your power came back on?
Power's on. We can now start the podcast. So I'm just really excited to be here.
We can now start. Let me go back to sharing my
now.
screen.
I mean, we're all here. That's great.
Oh my goodness! What a process live streaming is. Maybe somebody should make an asynchronous product.
All right, so we crushed this tweet, so we can probably move past this one though.
All right, let's see what we got next. All right, kudos to Darren for this amazing feature. Every larger company right now should have a head of remote. The job, be the person responsible for any optimizations related to, temporarily going to remote or otherwise. I think that we talked about this actually a couple weeks ago, just this idea of Darren's position as head of remote becoming like a normal thing. Just every company will now need to have a head of remote. And I hear about this a lot in
I think Webflow hired this like head of people or something. And you hear about it a lot with like diversity roles and HR roles. And I don't know. I mean, I grew up in Florida. We don't have the same Silicon Valley HR policies that a lot of companies have. And so I've always laughed at like all these ridiculous role names that they give these, positions, because I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to kind of the same thing. You're taking care of ensuring that the people that you're hiring are taken care of, that they're comfortable, that, there's policies in place for who you hire and ensuring you're getting the best talent in there. And at the end of the day, I think that a head of remote encompasses a lot of these like HR roles. Is remote enables diversity because it means that you're not hiring all the same tech bros from the same, college that all graduated from the same location and the same, dorm. We had a fun troll account the other day on Twitter that was loving to argue with Hunter and I. And one of the things they accused
we shall not name names.
Or one of the things they accused me of is being like a tech bro. And I'm like, dude, I am so far from a tech bro. Like there's like cows outside my house. Like I don't subscribe to that, culture at all. And, I think, Andreas is right here. I think that every company needs to have this head of remote position. And I think that it should encompass things like diversity, people, hiring. Like it has to do with so much more than just like a remote strategy. There's a lot more that a head of remote is really involved in. And we talked to Darren about this when he was on the podcast. It's just all the different things that he does. Like they did a talent show. They did they gave everybody like a Friday off just to like spend time with their family. And that's stuff that he's doing as head of remote. But that has really nothing to do with remote work. It has to do with just taking care of your people. Alexander, what do you think? Do you think every company will have this moving forward?
Yeah, it's interesting. Going back to the point we were discussing with Jordan, I think that every company should be thinking about these things, but probably most companies shouldn't have a head of remote. That should just be stuff that the CEO thinks about all the time, right? Or like when that company is at the scale where they can support, say, a head of diversity, they should have a head of diversity who's thinking about that. And remote is just the future that we see is that remote is just so normal. Like you don't talk about, is this a remote company or not? It's just a set of people working together.
Exist.
Right.
Yeah.
And, of course you should be thinking about like how you communicate. Right. And of course, therefore, you should be thinking about like, well, what is the underlying decision-making framework that we use? Right. And of course, you should be thinking about, well, what is the working environment of our people? And you shouldn't need to have someone who's head of remote to think about that. But if you're so large that you can have a specialist working on that thing, like for sure, that's awesome. We're happy for you. But I don't think you need a head of remote to work remotely. You should just be thinking about it anyways.
Yeah, I was talking to one of the directors over at NBC, and he said that 11,000, actually it was 11 or 15,000 people all at once needed to go from literally in the office, New York City, California, and they all needed to be remote at the same time. So in that case, I can see a temporary like head of remote, someone that's actually guiding them through it, because, getting all those physical documents and like office spaces into something like Slack or Microsoft Teams, like that's relatively easy. I mean, it took his team like 6 weeks to get it accomplished. But to me, that's really where the work kind of starts, not stops. I think you do need to have somebody on your team that's advocating for like, guys, stop calling each other. Like you need to like someone that can really enforce the best practices.
Processes are definitely key in remote. I think there's even a tweet that's coming up about that, just in terms of like documentation and where we communicate, how we communicate. So yeah, absolutely. That's going to be key. We'll obviously want to see Remotion and Yak become part of those processes moving forward in remote teams.
Exactly.
What do we got next?
All right, Mr. Klinger.
All right. Okay. So this is the tweet that Charlie missed while he was gone. It says, when you make yourself the product, you have no competition. I don't know who picked this. I have no idea what this means. Hunter, did you?
Charlie, you're up.
Charlie, you're the only one who doesn't have backstory. I have no idea what this even means. I don't even know why it's in the show.
Who's this Jack Butcher guy? I guess he's incredible. There's the incomparable Jack Butcher.
He has no competition. That's right.
I wonder.
Okay, so we all agree we have no idea what this is talking about.
I have a pretty strong opinion of what this means.
Okay, so is it the stripper thing that Hunter said?
No, absolutely
not.
It
has nothing to do with stripping. Got it.
Yeah, I think it's saying that, look, there's only one of you, right? There's only one person who's been through the same life experiences as you and thinks the world needs the same things as you. And so there's only one person who's going to build what you build if you let yourself, speak to what makes sense to you. So like, I don't know, just using Remotion as an example because we're working on it right now. There are some unusual things about Remotion. And for example, so like basing this on who we are as founders, like Charlie and I are the type of people who really want to live where we live. There's a reason I moved to New York. There's a reason he moved to Chicago. But if we lived in the same town, we would totally go to the same office, like maybe 3 days a week, 2 days a week. We like that human contact. And we don't actually care, like, you know, maybe I could Slack him about something and just have like a 10-second interaction. I would still rather ask him in person if I was in person with him, because it's nice to just talk to another human being and smile at
Because you like each other.
Yeah. And so therefore, you know, the remote product that we're building is one where half of the product is providing the communication primitives, just like you folks, to efficiently and productively talk about something. But the other half is entirely about helping teams feel connected. And that's why we build features like the way that you can update yourself in your Remotion, which like half of our users love and do like 3 times a day. And so no one else would think of that, because I don't think that other people are thinking about remote work in the same way as us. They don't have the same desires as us. And our hope as founders is that this resonates with people, right? And other people see it and want to work the same way.
I think that makes sense. I also, now that you're saying it, like, I think I hear this even from a entrepreneurial freelancer thought leader perspective, and say, you know, you have those people out in the world that you look to that, I don't know, let's give Gary Vee as an example, right? Like, he is the product, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, no one really cares what he's putting out or what he's doing. Like, his wine is like, right? Like, but people buy because Gary Vee is selling it. He is the product at the end of the day. So I think that that's like really what they're talking about here, is if you own the like output on the end, it's really like you that you're selling, because you're selling your experiences, your brand. You know, I think that's what you said about Remotion is really true, is that a lot of what we put into Yak is based off of like our own team being remote for the last 5 years, and the things that we found worked and didn't work. And yeah, I mean, you're right. I get that. Thank you for bringing clarity to what I thought was a tweet about stripping.
It seems like there's a touch of self-development here, right? Like if you're like constantly iterating on yourself, like you can't look at other people. That's how I'm sort of reading into it now that you guys are saying that. It's stop looking at what other people are doing and just focus on yourself and iterate, build an MVP, iterate, launch, test, send out surveys, get feedback.
We got a question here in the comments. Charlie, how do you support people remotely when they vary on work, personalities, workflows? Like, how do you support all those different types of personalities at your company?
Oh, it's really hard. Everyone has a different amount of how much they want to get into meetings or like talk to you in person. To me, I think a big part of it is not using prescriptive tools. Some tools are very strict about how they do things, and not creating forced structure around how you work helps a lot. For us, like something that makes it really hard for our team is how much time zone difference we have. People on one side we have like Australia, and the other side we have Uruguay, which is one further than New York. And when you have a big time zone variance, like how people can work on their own time when they're most productive, when you have to deal with family stuff and all that is really key. But like the remote work actually makes it easier for them to be able to deal with that. And the reason why it works is because you have to have a high level of trust in your team that they can figure things out. And if you have that, then it all works through.
Yeah.
Actually,
I want to
talk
riff
about
on that.
trust
Go
all
ahead.
the time. Oh, you know, go ahead. I was just going to say, we talk about trust all the time, but if you guys, you know, have something to say about it, feel free.
So one of our core company values is we empower others. And this is really core to like how we work as a company and how we build Remotion. And I think it's sort of interesting because, you know, we obviously spend a lot of time reading how people think about remote work, and we hear a lot of thinking about how it's important to create analog spaces that are virtual where everyone can opine on something, say, right? And that works for some people, but it doesn't actually work for everyone, because not everyone likes to make decisions in a consensus-driven way. So the way that we think about it is, when you work at Remotion, we trust you to own like an entire thing, and it's up to you to decide how to run that thing, up to you to decide what that thing is, and also to decide how to involve other people and how to work with other people. And so like a core part of how our team works and how we develop our product is that you can decide, you know, how much meetings you want to have about a topic versus how asynchronously you want to work on a topic. You can decide if you want to, you know, have everyone opine at one point in time, or if you want to talk to people one-on-one beforehand. And I think this is the challenge with remote work. Like, because all of a sudden everyone's virtual, there's a lot of push for like leaders to be like, okay, I'm going to figure out the system that everyone uses to make decisions. Like we're all going to comment on Jira tasks, and like every decision will be a pull request, right? And I think that that's a little bit missing the point in when you think about how different each human is. And if you can build a fabric for communication that works across decision-making styles and collaboration styles, that's more powerful and effective.
Yeah, and I think we've seen as well as like it varies per type of role as well as person. So like designers work differently to developers. A person in HR is going to communicate in a different way that a founder is going to communicate. Even in our own product with Yak, we see this with the difference between like video and voice. I've had devs that we worked with very early on that I would use Yak with, and I would communicate with voice, and they just felt more comfortable shooting me a Slack message as a response. And that was fine. And that's why I kind of liked, the workflow of Yak's asynchronous behavior, is because some people, I guess, just didn't feel comfortable hopping on voice. And what we've also found, especially in a very remote team, is that it varies per, location / language. So, what we found is with people with a very language barrier, they feel a lot more comfortable speaking constantly in their native language. But when they need to talk to somebody who's maybe not speaking in their native language, they relegate back to like an email-based communication or a Slack-based communication, because they can type things better because they don't feel uncomfortable speaking the language. And it's all these like small nuances that you have to like manage when you're building a remote team, between understanding how someone wants to communicate, how often they want to communicate, and then what's the process overall as a company. How do we communicate, right? What's the system that we use? Just like you said, is it Jira issues? Is it pull requests? GitLab, obviously it's GitLab, but they do so much over pull requests, like even to the degree of like company decisions are made as like pull requests, even if it's not going into code, which I find very interesting. Obviously it's very deep to their culture. But I don't know that I would be able to even get my team on board with that, because the concept alone is so foreign to a good amount of our company.
Yeah, GitLab is super cool. Like the way that we look at GitLab is like one of the most successful, distributed companies, and they found a culture that works really well for them, and they hire people for whom that culture works. So
that culture is like forefront. Like it's like the most important thing is like nailing that culture.
Right. And I think the exciting opportunity that you and we have identified is like, how do we enable remote work for more people, right? Like over time, as the tooling gets put in place, like say pull request, that's a new tool at some point, right? As the tooling gets put in place, you can pull more and more people into working comfortably and productively remotely. And I think what we are working on is pushing that frontier further and further, so that eventually almost anyone who does work online can do that work remotely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this next tweet from Chris is basically the same thing. Written communication, the most important skill for workers to cultivate. Reading and understanding, also key. Cultural issues arising from misunderstanding, meaning behind the way people write, becomes a big issue. And we talk about this obviously a ton with Yak, because we feel that voice and video and seeing someone and talking to somebody is like crazy important, and just in communication in general. But when we talk to, I think Hunter, you can speak to this. Like when we talk to Zapier, they had so much to say about like written historical context and how important that was just as a process level.
Yeah. Well, Zapier and GitLab pretty much document every single thing. So Zapier documents everything in Slack, so that way they can search for it. Any new employees can come in and see how decisions were made. But then obviously at GitLab, almost every single thing that they have in their company is posted publicly. So they take it to the next level. But it's really interesting that both resort to document first. And talking with one of the product managers over at Twitter, that's something that they're pushing for right now, especially during COVID, and everybody's now working at home. They are now pushing everybody, like the entire company has to be document first, written first. Some people call it remote first, but I think it's just more specifically written first, because it's just so important to have that written, which I'm excited that Yak actually has transcription, because now you can still speak to somebody like you normally would, but you're still able to search it. And I just think that maybe the word isn't necessarily written skills, but you just need to have communication skills in general. Because if the world does shift into something like what we're building, which is voice first transcriptions, and as obviously transcriptions will get to be immaculate at some point. But I think it'll just shift more into just communication in general. But that's
it's
just sort of
interesting what you say there, though, because this tweet in particular, Chris, is saying that getting better at writing will solve the misunderstanding problem. I would argue that no level of getting better at writing will solve the fact that text is still devoid of emotion, and doing a call over something like Remotion is ultimately going to be the better way to communicate. I don't know, whatever 100%. You're feeling. Like, I learned early on while we were working on Yak that me sending feedback over Yak using my voice was just 10 times more effective than me dumping something in Slack, because my designers felt like I was just being a dick to them, right? Because I was just like, I'm not a fan, try again, right? Because that was like the fastest way to get my thoughts in front of me. And my designer's like, oh my God, like he hates it. My work is terrible. And I'm realizing like, yeah, I mean, it comes off cold and unemotional when you just drop something into a text message like that.
It's like what I said at the beginning. My mom would text me K, and I'm like, Kristen, what's wrong? Are we fighting right now? Like, is something going on?
Kristen,
right?
Is there a K with a period afterwards? Because that
the period that makes it even worse.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, are we about to have a fight here, Mom? But again, just people communicate differently. So I would agree with Hunter with this and say put an asterisk next to it and just say communication in general is really key.
Yeah,
I think so funny how like emoticons and exclamation points all of a sudden start to change that written communication, and I think it's an awareness, rather than like getting better at grammatical, side of things. Like, does that make sense, Alexander? Like, I see you nodding. I feel like I'm making sense.
No, this makes sense. I mean, I think that written communication is incredibly important, but it's only one of the many tools that someone has, right? And the key is choosing the right tool for the right occasion. Like, a lot of feedback say that's one of the things it's more obviously known that, like, hey, giving feedback verbally is really valuable, right? Sorry, live, as opposed to in writing. It's just so incredibly difficult to pull out all the nuance of what someone's trying to say, what they're feeling, how they want the reader to feel in writing. I would actually kind of look at this a little differently. I think there's, again, a common misconception that, the more you write, the better your collaboration is. But what's interesting is, like, we look at teams using Remotion, and they collaborate much better once they start using Remotion. And what happens is they start having a few high bandwidth chats every day, and they actually spend less time in Slack. And so the result is that there's stuff happening in writing, and that's the structured communication. Oh, I see these things. That's the structured communication, like recording so that the rest of the company can understand, or like the decision can be read later. But a lot of the communication that can happen before the structured communication can be informal, and that can be over voice. And that means that you spend less time going back and forth, misunderstanding in Slack, more time just being like aligned, feeling the energy of the other person, having more ideas, expressing more ideas too, before you get to the written stage.
Okay, we got this comment here. We've still covered up Charlie's face, which is hilarious. There's like, no matter what I do, Charlie's just not going to be shown in the stream. But right tool for the right occasion. I think it's like a super valuable comment. Charlie, I'm sorry that you're just not going to get your hour of fame here.
Leave it however it is. It's good now. Leave it however it is.
I'm just going to keep messing with it so that the thing just constantly moves throughout this live stream. We'll turn this into audio. It goes up on iTunes. Nobody will see all the technical difficulties that we had. It's fine. Let's see. Do we have another one here? Nope, that was it. That was the last one. So we hit our 30-minute mark. 25 minutes of it was technical difficulties and covering Charlie's face. I want to kind of give you guys a second to maybe just kind of update the audience on where you're at with your product and, new features. I know you just sent out an email with like supporting multiple teams. We have some big updates on our end, like group messaging just came out. We're going to probably do a big push next week for that. So Alexander, Charlie, maybe Charlie. I just want Charlie to talk. I feel bad. Charlie, what is a new feature that's on Remotion that you're super excited about? Get your face really close to the camera so that we can just focus on you.
Oh, man, that's gold.
It reminds me of Monsters, Inc. and Mike Wazowski when he was on the magazine. And
yes.
Okay, yeah. I'd love to talk about Remotion. Remotion's super cool. I love it. Might be a little biased. So the idea of Remotion is you have like selfies of your team. We call it the shortlist on the desktop, and it kind of shows who's on your team, who's around, and it's always kind of on top of all your apps, and it's small and in the corner. You got to check out the website to kind of get a mental picture of it.
And this is presence-based, right? Like your
yeah.
idea is that, we want people to feel like there's people working around them.
Exactly. Yeah. The pictures of each person on the team is very easy to update. So the idea is your entire team constantly updates the selfie, is what we call it. And then you can show a little status about how open you are to chat live. And then you can hover over their heads and you can jump in and you can get into a quick call with that person, or ask to get into a quick spontaneous call. But the really cool feature that we recently released was because this app is kind of on top of your work, you can kind of leave it on the side of your IDE or something when you're coding, for example. We made a new feature where if you hold down Shift and you scroll into your app, you actually can click through the app so that you don't need to move around the shortlist while you're doing your work. So you can always kind of have your team by your fingertips, but in an unintrusive way. And yeah, so that's a cool feature.
Awesome. Alexander, you and I talked about this the first time. I would love you to just tell the audience the amazing story of the brand name and the roller coaster that it was getting it named Remotion.
Sure. So let me start even earlier to something that I spoke about with Justin. Sorry, not with Justin, with Hunter. And the hilarity of when we first started working on this problem, we actually had a concept. We called it light chat. I think the concept was like audio messaging and screen sharing at the speed of light. And I hadn't seen Yak at the time when we started working on this. But months later, after we decided not to work on light chat, I saw Yak and I'm like, wow, this is literally light chat. So we actually started with this hypothesis that, sharing communication over audio is much higher bandwidth than over text. And so let's build an asynchronous voice messenger that's like just available at your fingertips. And it was kind of derived out this app that I had built as a side project before Charlie and I started working together called Quaver, which is in the App Store, but I think I turned off the Firebase account, so it doesn't work anymore. But it's literally like Yak, but obviously not as developed for your phone. With the voice messages and transcription. And so we actually started building this async tool. And it was only through spending a lot of time working on it, talking to a lot of folks working remotely that we realized, hey, that's only half the battle. The other half is creating awareness and connection, which is easier to do live, which is hence why we started doing live. We didn't realize that live actually has this whole slew of other challenges that you got to fix. And then thinking about, okay, well, why don't people chat live? Okay, we need to create awareness of the team. And just a minor point, we think of awareness, not presence, because awareness is the benefit the rest of your team gets, whereas presence is kind of the cost to you. It's like you've got to like be online and everyone can see whether or not you're online.
I like that.
We prefer to think of awareness. So, we were thinking like, what should this thing be called? I came up with this horrible name that Charlie vetoed and we quickly changed, but it was called DALI because we were kind of trying to be inspired by Slack. But obviously
that's funny. Hunter got that immediately. He was like, oh, it's like Slack. I didn't get it at all. Like I didn't understand the name at all.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make that much sense. And the bigger problem is that DALI can read as daily. And that's just a common word. It turns out it's a product, which you may have heard of, the video platform. So that was a no-go. So we spent ages thinking about it. And eventually it hit us. We created this like round logo, which we called a donut affectionately. And, we had these like round heads and we're like, let's just call it a round. And so, we were working on a round. We got like usearound.co for like $10 or something. So it was great. .com for like $10. And this one day we're like, I looked for trademarks, but I'm not as good as Charlie is at like looking for things like super systematically. So I didn't realize there was already a trademark on a round. A month later, Charlie goes in and looks, I don't know why, and finds there's a trademark for a round with this company. And the trademark is like, trademarks like everything that you could possibly want to build in like a unified communications app. So we're like, damn, wonder who these people are. Coincidentally, like a few days later, I get this invite to a dinner hosted by a VC firm. And on that invite is Dom at around at XYZ. And we're like, shoot, what do we do? Because it turns out that that trademark that they had filed for had like run into some issues and they had 2 weeks to apply for the trademark. Otherwise they would lose their trademark and then we could apply for our trademark. So we were like, do we like talk to them and remind them that we exist, and then like, they'll fix their trademark, or do we just kind of like try to like not go to the dinner and like hope that they don't notice us? And we figured that was a risky strategy. You might as well just be upfront. So I emailed this Dom person, and I'm like, who's very nice, by the way. And I emailed him. I'm like, hey, are you around with this trademark? Because if you're not, you might want to change your name. And if you are, then like, do you still want it? Because like your trademark's not.
Do you still want it?
Yeah, like can we have it? Like I don't know, maybe you found a better name. Anyways, it turns out that he did want it, and they were just in stealth mode. And he's a former founder who actually had this happen to him in his previous company, where he was trying to use a name that had been secretly trademarked. So he felt really bad, and they were incredibly gracious and gave us time to come up with our own name. And so, Around was a pretty decent name. So it took us like a couple months or maybe a month. I don't know. Dom was really nice and gave us time to come up with a name we liked. We created like massive Excel spreadsheets for like how to come up with a new name. It was very sort of depressing period.
Oh my god.
And if anyone listening would like thoughts on coming up with good names, we have this entire spreadsheet methodology that we learned from one of our advisors, Ariel Jackson, that I would be happy to share.
Oh, that'd be cool. Maybe we could put a resource out at some point and share that. That would be neat. I mean, we have a system in place too. I don't know, Jordan. It's probably not as systematic as whatever they put together, but
definitely
we brand so many things that our investors ended up asking us to stop branding things.
Wait, what's an example of that?
Early on we had Yak. We had Backtrack, which we launched. We bought a domain for. Backtrack is its own app with its own logo, and it says at the bottom, powered by Yak at like the bottom of the screen, but other than that, like it's its own thing. And a lot of people have no idea that Yak is the company behind Backtrack. And then we built BRB, and BRB was kind of like our tween brand for the hell of it. And our investors are like, what are you doing? We're like, dude, it took like a week, not even, to like spin this up. Like, you bought brb.chat, made a really bomb ass logo, and then threw up a quick landing page, and it changed the color of the Yak app to blue. Like, it was so simple. It was like, why not bother? And our investors are like, because focus. And we're like, yeah, but it was for a competition. We won, and actually, in all actuality, I think Hunter can show the metrics to say that it was very much worth it, because actually the guy who is writing a lot of our blogs for us right now actually found us through BRB, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yep. He went viral. It was so funny. He went viral talking about like audio first platforms, like for your AirPods. And he found us through BRB, and he got he just told me the other day, he ended up getting like 800,000 people to his website. And so like part of that came to our website. So we just got a flood of traffic for no reason. And I hit him up and I was like, dude, we got to hire you. He's been working with us ever since. So it's kind of funny how it all works out.
So, it worked out in our favor to like have these different brands, because I think it was kind of a spray and pray approach, like reach audiences that maybe people, weren't investigating. And now all of a sudden we come up in the like social audio space, because Yak wasn't even remotely trying to compete in that space. But now our brand is there somewhere. And, we're similar to you, like BRB's still in the store, but it runs, but it's not, it hasn't been updated in ages, because we're so, heavily focused on Yak. But the app is still out there. The brand is still out there. And every once in a while, we'll see somebody that comes in and says, hey, I found BRB and saw what you guys were really up to. And we're like, yes, marketing, achieved. That's what we're shooting for.
I'm not gonna lie. We think that you folks are really good at marketing, and we're definitely taking notes, figuring out how do we get the word out about Remotion as well as you have done with Yak. So that's cool.
Well, you know what, man? The 4 people on this stream. You got 4 people right now, one of which at least works for us, so they're aware of you.
That's awesome.
No, man. What we're gonna do is we're gonna break this podcast up for those of you who are listening. This is part of the magic sauce right here. This is the actual content. So what happens is that this content gets broken down. Emilio, he's probably listening. He will be editing this, so you guys will be able to have like a 1 to 2 minute snippet of your story. And that's what gets posted out. And so like people will see it's like from Remote Voices, and Yak's involved, but basically that's all we did. Like we had a podcast of Justin, and actually it was just Justin and Jordan talking to the podcaster. I wasn't even involved at that point. I came in late because I walked in on a guy going to the bathroom. That's a different story. So I took out my phone, started recording. Next thing I know, we had 180,000 views on a story very similar to what you just told. So the storytelling, that's literally it. That's the magic sauce.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hack here, for anybody listening in the post of how do we do our kind of like guerrilla marketing tactics, it's kind of the raw approach. Like we don't spend too much time on this shit. What we found is like Hunter and I were doing a podcast, I think every week or every other week, like professionally with like a soundboard in a room, like with intros and ads and like all this stuff. And then we would ship it to this company who would edit it. And like, we were never happy with the quality of it. There was always something that needed to be changed. And like, it ran too long and I rambled and like, just all this stuff happened. And we ended up just like pulling out these clips anyway. So I got to the point that I was like, if we do it live, like as a live stream, it will force us to not be too picky. And it'll just be slapdash, hacky, thrown together. But there'll be these snippets that we can pull out that we can remarket with, because there is some gold in here, right? And then we're not forcing ourselves into this problem of like never getting, like the podcast never got released. The real ones that Hunter and I did, the audio only one never went anywhere. It's in some Google Drive somewhere because we never finished it because it was too much work. So this forces us to actually get content out without caring what the quality is. And I think that there's a huge thing to say about pushing yourself, to get stuff out without being too, careful about, oh, is it perfect? Is it polished? No, people care about your story, and that's what really is exciting. So yeah, we'll clip this up, tell the Charlie's little tidbit about, the Genesis and Alexander, where you guys started at the beginning, and it'll be good clips that you guys can share out. And I don't know, that's the pro tip from Hunter and I on this podcast is just do things raw and unfiltered, and at least you get content that way.
I mean, I feel like this is part of your product, right? Like, when you're on a Yak and you record a message and you say something, okay, if it's really bad, I might like delete it and say it again. But like generally speaking, I'm not going to go and like edit mid-paragraph, right? I'm just going to send the thing and it'll be communicative.
Exactly.
That's actually why we don't even let people listen to their Yak messages.
Yeah,
we don't want you to listen before you play it because we want you to just send it and not worry about it.
That's awesome. And that's exactly why we don't let you preview your selfie before, like once you like get a preview, but then once you click the take button, it takes, and that's your selfie now. There's no like, hey, are you cool with this selfie? Do you want to keep it? And that's also, again, part of why we think right tool for right job. Sometimes synchronous communication is best because you can just get there and say what you have to say, and it's not perfect, but you're less likely to misunderstand each other. You can ask clarifications live. You don't have to edit like the hell out of a paragraph.
Yeah, definitely.
Sweet.
Well, Remotion's all about awareness, man. So how can anybody in the feed or in the chats, how can they get a hold of you and get more aware of you?
We're still hidden, Charlie.
I guess two things. The first is go to our website, remotion.com. We are just in open beta, so if you're on macOS, download it and give it a spin. And the second thing is, we're at the stage where we just love hearing from everyone using the product. And if you email hello@remotion.com or Alexander@remotion.com or Charlie@remotion.com, we will be very, very happy. We'd love to chat with you over email, or even better, we'll probably be like, hey, here, do you want to talk live and set up a call? So, check out the site, remotion.com. You can check out our Twitter, remotionco, or just email us directly and let's chat.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Charlie, I'm sorry I covered your face a million times. This is only like our second or third stream using this new software. So next time we have you on, I'll just like put you in the top right-hand corner so we never cut you off. But we appreciate you guys joining. I'm going to kind of play us out with some music, and we'll drop notes to all the Remotion links when this goes live. So thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you guys
for having
talking with you.
Thanks for having us on.
Peace.